Welcome to another Perspectives podcast. Josue here. As usual, we're back with another recording from the Democratic Republic of Congo, a fellow believer, attended the Oral Roberts University, and I have Mr. Chase Brown himself here.
Yeah.
Native Texan. You were born in Texas, right?
Oh, yeah.
I think so. Native Texan. You went to University of North Texas. He's a aspiring philanthropic creative.
There you go.
He loves writing. I don't know if he does or not. I keep saying it until it sticks. How you doing, man?
Dude, doing good.
Yeah.
That's coming out buttery smooth, man.
It is. I've been working on my
butterman.
voice. Yeah, I've been working on my voice and just trying to be better, for the people, for the kids.
Yeah. You're hydrated. You had your ankle workout today?
I got my ankle workouts. I'm drinking purified water. I think it's going to be a great podcast. But as you guys know, every time we bring or have a podcast, we're always trying to bring a special guest for you guys. And today we have the legend herself. Is that okay if I call you that?
No.
No, okay. She's a little shy, but we're working on it. We have Penielle. How you doing, Penielle?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
We're doing great. So for those of you that might be wondering, questioning, so Penielle and I, we are cousins. It's an African term. When I say cousins, you're probably wondering what that means. It's not something that's blood related, but it's just there's a closeness. So it kind of just puts you within the family. So
legit?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought y'all were legit cousins.
No.
His parents are my parents' marital godparents.
There we go. That's awesome.
Yeah. So a lot of people are like that. So I'm giving away secrets.
Yeah.
Congo secrets.
Yeah. Congolese secrets.
Keep it in the country.
I got to. But how's it going? How is quarantine and everything?
I mean, it's going.
Yeah.
It's going. I think there's one Bible verse that I have to remind. Well, it's not a Bible verse. It's a saying.
Okay.
Before I quote the Bible.
Yeah.
With things that are in the Bible.
Okay.
There's this saying that my friend likes to say that in all circumstances he remains good. I'm sure there's a Bible verse.
Probably correlates with that.
Yeah,
somehow.
that correlates. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of like how I'm navigating through the quarantine and just COVID-19 in general. Yeah.
Yeah.
In all circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that in a little way, and just simply reminding ourselves of that is encouraging.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, in the midst of everyday life, like, we can so easily get distracted and everything like that. And so, awesome. Well, would you want to share just a little bit of background on just kind of who you are, as Josue kind of always says, where your people are from, and just any other thing that you'd like to share?
Sure. So my name is Penielle. I'm 25 years old. I'll be 26 on October 14th. I'm originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I was born there in 1994. My family left the Congo at the end of 1996 and immigrated to Belgium because there was a war. The dictator Mobutu was being removed from power by Kabila I, and so there was a war going on at the time, and my dad just didn't deem that it was a safe place for us to live, and so we moved to Belgium, and my dad didn't love Europe, and so he ultimately decided that we would come to America. So I came to America around 1997, like early 97, because we didn't spend much time in Belgium. So early 97, we moved to the United States, and I lived between HEB, the Hurst Euless Bedford area, and the Roanoke area. And we started in HEB, moved to Roanoke, and then eventually moved back to HEB. And I graduated high school here, and when I graduated, I actually got married right out of high school.
Dang.
I got married right out of high school. I moved back to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where my ex-husband worked at the time. And in 2018, because of a couple of unpleasant circumstances.
Yeah.
I left the Congo and I moved back to the United States December of 2018 and kind of just started my life over in the
Yeah.
United States. So, oh, I'm a mom. I
Okay.
have 2 boys.
Shout out to them.
Shout out to my sons. The
Yes.
oldest is 5. His name is Shaddai.
Okay.
And then the youngest is 1. His name is Zion.
Okay.
Dang.
I think something that you mentioned that kind of stood out to me. For those of you guys that already know by now, like I mentioned earlier, I'm also from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Shout out to us. So I obviously know this, but for people that don't know, the DFW is almost like a hub, right? For the Congolese people, it's just Dallas. Everybody knows about Dallas. So can you kind of speak into that a little bit and just how it was coming to a place where, as an immigrant, there were other immigrants, I guess you can call it, in the area. You kind of were able to build relationship, community, fellowship with, and all that good stuff.
One thing about the Congolese community, especially when we moved as kids, I don't know if there was as much division as there is now in the community, but when we grew up, we didn't feel it. Like, I didn't feel it. Like, moving to America, it's like, it was just me, my mom, my dad, and my brother at the time, but we came and we were just welcomed by a huge community of other Congolese people. And now that I think back of all the families that have immigrated to Dallas and stuff, the Congolese community back in the late 90s was not that big in Dallas, Fort Worth, but it felt huge to us because it always felt like we were always surrounded by people who understood. We were all coming from a different continent. You know, I think people underestimate how far Africa is from the United States and how different it is. And so being able to come and being able to be welcomed by a community of people that have experience in the community that you are going to migrate into, but then they also understand where you come from because you come from there as well, was a great foundation to start with when we came. And I don't know, I may be biased, but growing up, you know, in the Dallas, Fort Worth, Roanoke area, I did feel it felt warm. The best way I can describe it is like it felt warm. It felt like you were walking into like a cabin.
Yeah.
You know, it was, I grew up, I know there's a lot of stuff going on in Texas, a lot politically, a lot racially, but to be completely honest, what I remember coming when I came to the United States, and I just remember the communities around me, the Hispanic community, the Caucasian community, the Asian communities, like everybody seemed warm. Maybe it was childlike naivety, I don't know, but from what I remember, it was pretty easy to migrate. And just to open up a little parentheses, because it was so easy for me to immigrate to the United States, there was a part of me that still held on to that Congolese heritage, because when you walk into the home, it is Congo. When you step outside, it's America. And
It's like the embassy in the house.
And so it's like it's a very delicate balance to where like Congolese American kids don't fit completely in the Congolese community, and we don't fit completely into the American community either. So while it was a positive thing, being able to migrate into such a welcoming community as a child, it was difficult growing up because you didn't really know where you fit. Didn't know if you didn't fit with Caucasian Americans, you didn't fit in with Black Americans. You fit in with Congolese Americans and the Congolese community in general, but this is not Congo. And then when you would get to Congo, you would be too American to be Congolese. So it's like, where we go.
Did you experience that?
I mean, I feel like that's the same for everybody. Just like you said, I mean, that's the best way to describe it. You literally walk in your house, Congo, from the smell to the language to how your parents treat you, and then you walk outside of your house, you're back in America, right? So it was really interesting.
Very confusing at times as well, because you wouldn't understand why certain things were culturally acceptable for your friends' families, and your parents were just like categorically like no. It was very. It could be heavy at times. And one thing about our community and the parents in the Congolese community, they don't really explain.
Oh, jeez. What? get an explanation.
They don't really like. There's not a lot of communication. You're just supposed to
Talk about it.
listen and just obey, and it causes a lot of confusion for kids because it's like, okay, when I walk outside, this is the norm, but then when I walk inside, this is taboo. But then nobody's telling me why. So
Yeah, and I'm sure it can be a little difficult, like especially just thinking about it with like your parents, for example, because even teaching you how life goes over here, like that's something that they're learning at the same time that pretty much you're learning to,
Yeah.
whereas people who were like second generation Americans or third or who have been here for many generations, it's something where they are kind of used to it. And so their parents are able to just focus on teaching rather than majorly like learning and then just like somewhat teaching what they know. And because I've seen that with other friends that I have that have immigrated over, like you mentioned you were in the HEB area. Were you friends with any of like the Tongan community?
yeah, the
or-
Polynesian community, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's like some of my best friends, like growing up, were from that community, and it was amazing to be able to learn from them, like learn their culture, learn their customs, and learn valuable pieces of wisdom from them. That's like unique to their culture, and like that's something that they were kind of sharing was for their parents, because for the friends who I was mainly close with, they were, would it be third their grandparents came over here. So would they be third generation or like second generation?
Third, that'd be third
Yeah.
generation.
And so for them, they were able to kind of learn a little bit because their parents were able to kind of learn as they've gone through and had that life experience. But still for them, it was almost kind of like a culture shock in a way whenever you go, as you said, from like inside the home to outside the home and wrestling with like what is the proper way to like go about life and what are the different values and things like that is big, because like something that we've talked about as far as culture goes, like every culture has its own, I would say, like values it pursues, but then as well like the mechanisms or like ways that they like pursue those values. And that's something that needs that conversation within I would say like a multicultural society is something that like needs to happen, I'd say every now and then, whether on a big level or whether just on like a small level within like just the family or a town, like is something that needs to happen, but that I don't think necessarily here and reflecting on it has happened very much. And so maybe like something I would ask is, how were you able to find comfort in those times and able to find sort of guidance and how to walk through everything in obedience and in wisdom? Because like you shared, kind of Congo cultures just listen to parents and obey. So I mean, maybe that's the simple answer, but maybe whenever you moved out on your own or things like that, at that point you still listen to your parents like a little bit, but maybe you're not living in their house because you're married. So what was that like?
I think my experience would be a little different from the typical Congolese American person. Because just when you would integrate yourself in society and kind of understand the different nuances between the American culture and the Congolese culture, I moved back to Congo. I got married
Gotcha.
right out of high school. So for me, that was an even bigger culture shock going back to Congo. Because I thought I knew what the Congolese community was like, but then leaving the United States and going to Congo with what I thought I knew about our culture was a very diluted version of what the culture actually entailed. And the way I was able to kind of like navigate and merge the two cultures was actually when I came back, because I think that is the most authentic way you can merge the two cultures, because I had such in-depth experience with the American culture because I grew up here, but then I also spent 6 years of my adult life in Congo, and I was able to soak in the culture back home and take in the good and reject the bad. Same with American culture. So when I came back, I think there's a lot of Congolese American kids deal with identity crisis a lot. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been able to go back. And when I came back, I'm still kind of like going through a period of just trying to quote unquote find myself. I know it's very corny, very cliche, but I think that there's not really one particular way or one particular method to be able to merge the two cultures successfully. What personally worked for me is that I stopped trying to find myself in either of those two cultures. I was like, okay, maybe I'm a hybrid of some sort because, God allowed me to experience both cultures in such an in-depth fashion. So instead of trying to find myself in those cultures, I dedicated my time to finding myself more so in God because I felt like that would navigate how to move through both cultures and through both situations and how to kind of like mix all of it together, because there's not really a way we can shallowly describe what we feel and what we think, but it's so much more in depth than what we're even able to vocalize. There are certain things that we feel that we can't make sense of. And so for me, the only thing that really worked, especially when I came back, I was like, okay, God, okay, I don't really know. We're mixing peanut butter and oil here, okay?
Wow.
So
That's extreme.
yeah, so we're gonna have to make something out of it. So
Yeah.
tell me what to add, tell me what to remove, so something beautiful can come of it.
Yeah, and I love that, and because like I think for me it's like an affirmation of a thought that like we've talked about for seemingly on every podcast probably, but is this thought that like every culture in the world has at least like one unique characteristic of God in it, whether in, for example, like European culture, it could be like appreciation of like beauty, because you could see that with just like the art and the architecture, everything like that. In some Asian communities, it's just like tradition and respect. In maybe some South American communities, it's like the pace of everything. With like Congolese culture, like simply just obedience to authority figures is just something very good that us in America here like ain't really got at all. But so I think it's so cool that God was able to walk you through that by rooting that in Him and His Word, because from there, that's the one thing that we can base things on that's not maybe in a way like culturally defined, because His Word is just infallible and is something that is perfectly sufficient to be able to guide our life and for something to lay as like a foundation for our life and everything that we're building, no matter whether we're living in the Congo or here in America or anything like that. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to come back to that duality that you kind of mentioned earlier. But the question that kind of comes to mind, because I think it's something that I think about sometimes, like we were discussing earlier, America, right? So whenever you're in, where we come from, you kind of think about America. You hear words like, the land of the free, the milk and the honey, and all these things, like this big picture, right? This great picture that's painted for America. And then you come here and you spend pretty much your whole life here, and now you're adults, you've, made your own conclusions and things like that. So if you can give us like a pre coming to America understanding, and in the post coming to America understanding, some of your appreciations, like what Chase was talking about, some of the things that you've learned from the American culture that you really appreciate, some of the things you're like, I don't really like this about that. If you could talk about that a little bit.
I think my perspective, like I'm just trying to be as authentic as I can. I don't want you guys to be annoyed, but I don't really have any I didn't have any preconceived notions of the United States.
Yeah, but you were
before
young at the
coming.
time.
Yeah, because I was
Okay.
so young.
Yeah.
But I was able to really appreciate a lot about America when, like I said earlier, I moved back to Congo. That's when the differences stood out to me. The opportunities that there, when we speak of the land of opportunity, the land of the free, home of the brave, and all that, it may sound like corny,
Yeah.
like when we say, because we hear it so much. But then when you live in a third world country in a country where a woman virtually has no rights, you have no rights to anything. You have no rights to your children, the children that you have. You have no rights to your own body. You have no rights to your freedom. If your husband wants to lock you in the house and you're not going to leave, he can do that because he can pay off the military and he can pay off the police officers. And I speak of this in particular because I was married to somebody who was very prominent in the Democratic Republic of Congo, had political affiliations, had financial affiliations with not small people. Okay, so I was dealing with a very dangerous circle of people. And so being able to know that I had kind of like the fallback of America, if I ever decided to like leave, was when I really began to, yes, I believe that there are things that can be improved in America,
Yep.
but I do think that what is already in place is actually eons ahead of what I saw and what I lived through in Congo. In the United States of America, I have the luxury, if I'm being abused, to call the police. And even if maybe the outcome isn't exactly how I want it to be right at that moment, I can at least, there's a 95% chance that I will at least be able to be removed from that situation and be protected to a certain extent. Something will be done. I know that if I go to high school, I'll be able to maybe get financial aid, scholarships, and be able to go to school. Those are all things that I think kids in this community don't realize are luxuries in others. Being able to call for help, being able to go to school, being able to run for office, being able to, because there is a lot of room for opportunity. Maybe there are some demographics who are going to have to work a little harder than others, but nothing is really impossible in the United States of America for anyone. It just really depends. It's not likely that certain things might happen, but it's not impossible. But in the Congo, there are certain things that are impossible for certain people. It's impossible. There's no like probability that this could happen or work out or pan out for this person. Whereas in the United States, there's always like that sliver of like chance that there could be, that this could come to pass. And living in both societies, living in both countries, being exposed to both of the countries' laws and opportunities and just things of that nature, I realized just how much we are offered in America. And do I think that America could be defined as, land of the free, home of the brave, land of opportunity and stuff like that? Do I think that people's dreams can come true here comparatively to Congo? Absolutely. Absolutely. Congo is all about what family you were born into. Whereas in America, that's not what it is. It doesn't matter where you came from. If you're working to get to the top, you could get there. Congo, that's not the case. So.
Yeah. And like, I will say, because there's probably, I'll say some people, especially just with like the cultural conversation, I'd say going on right now, that are out there that do believe like, oh no, like if you're down like at the bottom of, socioeconomic spectrum, there's no way for you to work up in America, like, because the whole system is against you, everything like that. And like, I think what you said is true. And
Yeah, our parents came here with nothing.
yeah,
Like with nothing. And we are able to take what little they had and build some sort of foundation for ourselves and build off of that foundation and set our kids up to do better than what we did. if my son wanted to run for president of the United States, it wouldn't be impossible for him.
Yeah. And so it's something that, like, I think there's a couple reasons why people can struggle with not necessarily seeing the, like, just the possibilities that are here. And, like, I'll preface it with definitely saying, like, there is a tendency, I think we've talked about this off podcast, the Matthew principle or the Pareto distribution. So basically there is this tendency, which I think is a correct criticism of I'll say, like, humanity, that opportunities and things like that can tend to acquire themselves in the hands of fewer and fewer people. Like, for example, if you look at Elon Musk, like, that dude has infinitely more opportunities than 90% of the country. But that's not something that we can lay at the foot of capitalism nor the American society, because that also applies just to the music industry. The fact that 1% of the artists have 90% of the streams around the world. But it also applies to things like the mass of stars. So if a star has a lot of mass, the more gravity it has, the more mass it attracts, everything like that. And so I think we can see that this is almost something that is like a law of our existence and a law of nature, because as well in Matthew, Jesus says, like, to those who have everything, everything will be given. To those who have nothing, everything will be taken. And we've had conversations with other friends talking about, like, whether that was just a comment on the culture at that time or things like that. And because there was also, like, I think Jesus or one of the apostles said, like, the poor will be with you always and things like that. But I think it is just something that, one, that is just like a potentially like a fact of like our fallen existence and the fact that this world is sinful. And that there will always be people who will be greedy and take advantage of corruption or bad things that are going on. But as well, like, it is something that is just, it's a part of our existence. And so from there, those of us who do have, whatever resources or opportunities or things like that we're thinking about, like, that's where we need to step up in generosity. And that's where we need to make sure that those people who either opportunities being kept from or that don't have the potential to go to church in a non-persecuted way or not have the opportunity to educate themselves, like, that's where we need to step up and take responsibility and care for those people. And so kind of circling back around, though, I definitely think that, in general, like, this is a place in the world where, like, you do have those opportunities. And people don't really see that because not a lot of people have, like, traveled outside of the country. They don't have anything to really compare it to. And so they just kind of get this, like, little fishbowl effect where it's like, oh, I can only see what's going on here. And so I don't really understand, like, in total kind of what's going on. And that's where I think either these cultural conversations or traveling, which me and Butterman over here love to do, really, really provides, like, some value. And so, like, one of the things that I would kind of ask in terms of being able to provide that perspective to people who haven't been able to travel very much or don't know what it's like living in another country outside of our society is, like, what do you think are some of the good things and that are potentially, like, part of the American culture that other cultures don't have? And what was some of the good things from, like, Congolese culture that you really wanted to preserve and keep around? And therefore, like, make sure that that part of, like, the integration and assimilation into the culture, like, you wouldn't conform to the culture in those areas.
I think one thing that the U.S. might be able to offer to countries like the Congo is the notion of equality. I feel like we haven't completely mastered it yet.
No.
We are still working on a lot of things. But the fact that something like that, civil rights, women's rights, and, the Me Too movements and all of these movements that kind of incite moral equality in people would be desperately needed. in the DRC. Also, the fact that although people may think that they don't have much say in what happens on in the government, I think it's just people don't really look into how much power they have. Like when voting, like if you really sit down and you vote and you educate yourself on voting and who represents your state, who represents the Senate, who represents the House. Like as a people, we have so much power in the United States as to who's in power, as to who leads us, and kind of how the country goes. That's something that Congo needs, because Congo people don't have a voice. The people can vote for one candidate and another candidate will be named president. And I think those are all things that could be or would be very positive if they were implemented in the Congolese community. And stuff about the Congo that I think would be, a beautiful addition to the United States, kind of like culture and the American culture in general, I think is the preservation of culture. One thing that I noticed about America is, excuse me if I'm wrong, I don't feel like America has a particular type of culture. There's not one culture that represents America.
Yeah.
America is what I believe to be a melting pot. You know, there's like when we were talking about Twitter earlier, we can talk about Spanish Twitter and Panamanian Twitter and Congolese Twitter. And then when you think American Twitter, it's divided in so many subcategories, like Black Twitter and Latin American Twitter and Asian Twitter and like stuff like that. And there's not really a general culture that represents the United States completely and authentically, because the culture that I think some Americans might consider to be American culture is founded off of racism and discrimination and segregation, just things that I don't think should represent a country.
Yeah.
And so, and then another thing that I know about Congo that I just feel like if America added it to its everyday life, it would just make America such a more peaceful place. I feel like Congolese people or African people in general are very welcoming. They know how to receive guests. They know how to accommodate guests. They know how to take care of people in general. They aren't there. There is corruption, as there is in every culture, but I think a general people, like Congolese people in general, are very welcoming of each other. They're very close, like the family dynamic and the cultural dynamic, that brotherhood. You know, it's like Josue and I, we are not related by blood in any way. Like, we are not blood. We could get married today if we chose to. But he's my brother. You know, the Congolese culture, like, solidified that thought and that way of thinking in us. You know, somebody that carries the blood of your ancestors or come from your ancestral home, you know, that's your brethren, that's your family. And I just don't think that Americans really have that. You can have Black Americans whose families have been here since 1600s. And then you have Caucasian Americans who also have family who have been here since then. You put the two together and you will not feel that familial and that brotherly love that you would feel if you took two Congolese people and you put them in a room. They would find something to connect with each other. They would find something to talk about. And I don't think it's very rare. It happens though. You would sit a Caucasian American and a Black American and they would, you know, be kikiing and be like, oh, you know, we have this in common, this, that, and the third. But in general, no. And there has been such a division between all of the communities that make America America, that I think a coming together of all of those cultures, of all of those people, would greatly benefit this country. If, excuse me if I'm a little too frank, if I feel the Caucasian community just, you know, stepped a couple pedestals down and realized that we are all one people, that no one is superior, because we have to be honest with each other. There is a certain amount of Caucasian people who just think that they're a little better than other communities in the United States, and they kind of act like they monopolize or the United States is theirs. But we have to understand that every single person in America, aside from Native Americans, are immigrants. And if we can take that thought and really mix and mesh all of those cultures and make a culture that represents America inclusively, that includes every type of immigrant that made this country what it is, I think that there could be a culture, a beautiful culture that represented America. So.
Yeah, I find it interesting because I remember like back when we were younger, you go to a friend's house. I remember going to my friends. This like being Congolese or wherever else you may be from, if you're listening to this, and being in America, I remember going to a friend's house, and my friend was mad at his dad for whatever reason. And he started talking crazy to his dad. He was like, "Shut up, Steve." I'm just making up a name, right? He was like, "Shut up, Steve, I hate you," or something like that. He closes the door. I kid you not, like on the inside, I was scared, right? Because like for us, like that thought could never even cross my mind. Like
you don't think to say things like that.
It doesn't even make sense. Like I couldn't even laugh about it. Like I couldn't even play a joke. Like I couldn't even play that kind of joke. So I love that like you mentioned earlier, there's almost this, I mean, obviously there's extremes to it, but there's almost this like respect that you have for your elders, right? So in our culture, whenever somebody is older than you, you use the what's the word for it? Is this suffix? Is that kind of how you say Mr. and Mrs.?
Yeah, it's a
prefix. There it goes.
Yeah.
Like "ya" to describe someone that's older than you, right? Like my siblings, like one of my brothers' name is Jude. Jude. You say, I'll say "ya Jude," for example, right? That's just something that you use, right? But that's not like her, brother. So there's things like that are just kind of involved with the culture. I remember I was at a party once with, Dave and Michael. We're at Michael's house. You guys don't know who any of these people are, but we're at their house and we show up in Congolese culture. You show up to somebody's house, you got to say hi to everybody. You got to go there, bonjour mama, bonjour papa. You got to do all this and say hi to everybody, right? And so my friend forgot to say hi to somebody that apparently knew him when he was a baby.
They always know us
when he was a baby. Right? And so we're hanging out upstairs. All of a sudden, Dave walks away. Dave comes back. He's angry. I'm like, "Bro, you okay?" He's like, "Man, my dad is not cussing me out. My dad was yelling at me." I'm like, "Why's your dad yelling?" He was like, apparently somebody downstairs felt that Dave was disrespectful because he didn't say hi to him, right? So he called his dad, was like, "Yo, your son's being disrespectful." Type of deal. So like you could even imagine that. Like that's next level. That's crazy. So
yeah, I think anybody in the American culture, they think that was very dramatic, very extreme. But it might be extreme for the American culture, but that's one of the things that I grew up with that I want to transmit to my kids. When you walk into a room, you greet everyone. I think it's just certain things, and I think even when I took a debutante course, like etiquette courses, how to be a lady and stuff like that. There's a lot of, I think if you really look at the qualities of Southern people, like in the South, like real Texas and like, the real South, a lot of their values and a lot of the manner they treat people have a lot of correlation with Congolese and African and foreign traditions. I think that's something that made the South the South. We all know and we've all heard of Southern hospitality. And I think that a lot of the things that we may have in our culture that may seem extreme to like other Americans, there are certain similarities in like Southern culture. Because I have Southern friends. I have friends from America, but then I have Southern friends who, when I go to their house, their mom is welcoming, ready with lemonade, ready with something. Just hi, all that, and that reminds me a lot of how our moms are. Like if our parents know, well, I don't know if everybody's family is like that, but if like I told my mom that I'm gonna have friends over, her first thing was just gonna be like, okay, what are you gonna serve them? What do we have? What are they gonna eat when we get here? And I've been to some friend's house and I get over there, they don't even give me water. And I'm just like, what is happening here?
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because my family, as far back as I know, we were in Kansas for a little bit and then moved down to Texas and like, gosh, I think it was like the 70s, something like that. And so we've been like Midwest for a while, but yeah, like my grandparents on my dad's side are like very much that Southern hospitality where it's like, all right, if you don't offer someone a water or anything like that, like, all right, like you need to learn manners
Yeah.
and things like that. And so it's really funny. And then one question I would have, because I'd love to get your insight on this. So Congo, as far as like how diverse the country is it like mostly homogenous, or is it more diverse than, say, like, I mean, what would be like a not diverse, like China? Like China is all Chinese people. So for Congo, is it mostly like Congolese people, or are there like a lot of immigrants there, or like an immigrant population?
There aren't many immigrants. The immigrants that do come, there are some Chinese people and some Lebanese people who go there
Yeah.
for business, but they don't really integrate into the community.
Yeah.
But one very unique thing about the Congolese culture, we are all Congolese,
Okay.
but there are subcategories of Congolese. You have tribes.
Yeah.
Like Josue and I, we are from the Luba tribe, and that is the central in the heart of Africa. Africa and Congo, because
Yeah.
Congo is the heart of Africa and Kasai is the heart of Congo. And so you have les Kasaïens, so people, the Luba people, and then you have the Swahili people, and those are people from the eastern part of Congo. And then you have les Bangala, or des gens de l'Équateur, so people from the central portion of Congo. And then you have Bakongo, that's more so towards the mountains, and that's where during the transatlantic slave trade and stuff like that, that's where the slaves would leave from. I think the movie Tarzan, the more recent one, the most recent one, they actually shot it in Boma, which is in Congo. And so there's Luba, there's Bangala, there's Baswahili, there's Bakongo, and then there's Batetela. And Batetela, they're kind of like a mixture of Luba people and like other tribes, but they're also a tribe in their own way. And then there's people from Katanga. Now Katanga is very interesting because people from Katanga or Ouyuele, or the upper portion of Congo, they are people who immigrated from Kasai, so from my tribe. And so they're called the Lubakat. And then some of the people come from the eastern portion. And so the language that is mostly spoken, well, it used to be both the Luba language and the Swahili language, but there was a massacre in 1960 where they killed a lot of the Luba people. The Luba people, the tribe that Josue and I from, they're called the Jews of Congo. We have a lot of similarities with the Jewish culture, and for some reason, Jews and like people who have similarities with that culture just tend to be massacred at some point in time in history. And that's what happened to the Luba people in Katanga. That's why a lot of the people who live in Katanga, they have the same names and they have the same blood as Luba people, but the people in Katanga now are considered like their own like tribe per se. And so each one of those tribes has their own language. Now what's interesting is that the Bakongo language is Lingala, but Lingala became kind of like the universal language that all the tribes spoke.
Yeah.
But the Luba people, they speak Chuba. The Swahili people, they speak Swahili. The Swahili that we speak is different from Swahili Bora, because the Swahili that's spoken in Congo has some French connotations, whereas the Swahili Bora, it's a lot of English mixed in. And then Batitera, they have a language. Bakongo, they have a language. And then in those particular tribes, there's also more separation. Like my parents are both from Kasai, but my father is from the upper portion of Kasai and my mother the lower portion. And so my mom is from Kananga, my dad is from Bujimai. And both of those countries, both of those tribes and both of those provinces speak Luba, but their dialects are different. So
Yeah.
it's like Spanish from somebody from Mexico and then Spanish from
For
somebody from
Spain.
Spain.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that
Yeah.
goes on. But then also, Congo used to be the Kingdom of Congo. And so it wasn't just the Democratic Republic of Congo. It was the Democratic Republic of Congo with part of Angola, with part of Uganda, with part of Rwanda, with part of Tanzania, with part of the Republic of Congo. And then the Berlin Conference, they kind of broke off the pieces as they saw fit. And so there's a mesh of culture from all of those countries. But no, it's not like a Congolese person will know that they're Congolese. They'll know that that person's Congolese. But if you choose to dive in deeper, you'll be like, oh, are you Luba? Oh, you're Luba. Are you Luba from Kananga or are you Luba from Bujimai? Oh, okay. So you're from Bujimai. Are you Mukwasumba or are you Mukwanyanga? There's another separation of like tribes and families, and it's a lot. There's a lot of layers to being Congolese.
Yeah.
It's not just like you're just Congolese.
So then, does each of the tribes have sort of different values or like a different culture in and of like the tribe?
They have, there are some that have different values. Most of the tribes, there are two tribes that are extreme, okay? The Luba culture, the Luba tribe is very extreme.
Yeah.
Very patriarchal, very misogynistic. Like my tribe, very like head honchos, macho man type of stuff. Also because Kasai is located where I think this is where the world's largest amount of diamonds are found. And so men from Kasai, they are diamond miners, and so they're rich. They have a lot of money, and so that tends to go to their heads. And the men in Kasai they have a reputation of a lot of polygamy compared to a lot of the other tribes.
Talk about it.
And so they're very like macho, very dad man. And then you have Bakongo, and Bakongo is very matriarchal. They're much more gentle than like Luba people, but it's very bizarre because, okay, you know how like, but I'm not saying that like children belong to the dad, but in general, you know, when a man and a woman gets married, the woman takes after the dad's name, and then the children, they're the dad's legacy. That's his name that's being passed down mostly. You know, the mom's maiden name kind of like falls into the background.
Yeah.
But in the Bakongo tribe, that's not the case. The kids belong to the mother's family. So your mother's brothers have more say over your life than your father does. And there are just a lot of things that differ, like even how the bride price is paid between those tribes. Like
So I learned about that.
yeah. So like the bride price differs, and then the music, the way we speak, the way we dance, the way we dress, it differs from each tribe.
Okay. Because the reason why I'm kind of asking is I had this initial question in my head, but I wanted to see about Congo to see if there's anything we can learn from there. Because America, I think, is the most culturally diverse place. I think in the world. Maybe Canada, maybe one of the countries over in Europe, because they've taken in a lot of refugees, and so I can see.
I still think it's America though.
Yeah. So and so I can see initially how a place with this much, like with this many cultures embracing this multiculturalism can be difficult, because I don't really think it's somewhere historically that, at least off the top of my head, that I can remember, like has ever really been tried outside of America in terms of multiculturalism. And so one of the things I want to see is how can we properly pursue that, and how can we value each of the good parts of each of these cultures that's here in American culture to basically develop this united American culture. And because I definitely think, kind of going back to the values thing that I discussed previously, I think in a society, I can't remember where I heard this, but I think it can be true, that whenever you're living in a multicultural society, basically for there to be peace and unity, the values need to be fundamentally agreed upon, but then where the cultures can kind of go off in their own is like how to pursue those values. So, for example, equality for women is something that I think almost all of us here in America are down for. So say there was one culture that was just like, nah, fam, like we ain't about that. Like us as Americans I don't think we would necessarily put up with that very much. And so that, I think, I think there needs to be this like conversation about like, okay, what values are we going to pursue? So then we could hold people accountable whenever they're not like living up to those values. But so for Congo, going back to that, like what has been some of the things that y'all have done to be able to like unify these tribes? Do you see this commonality of values amongst the tribes? And when you don't, like how have those conversations kind of gone like between the tribes to become like unified as a country?
Inclusivity and representation.
Okay.
I think each tribe have had their voice heard to a certain extent. And there isn't room for much division in Congo, I would say, because there are certain aspects of people in certain tribes that differ from other tribes, but generally, we pretty much all kind of look the same in Congo, and we mostly all have like staple foundation foods that we all eat. There are just different nuances and incorporations in other tribes. Like there are delicacies that other tribes have, but almost all of us eat fufu or what do you call it? Cassava? No, pounded yams. There we go. Pounded yams. And so we all eat pounded yams. We may prepare it differently, but we all eat a variation of pounded yams. We all eat a variation of cassava. We all eat a variation of a certain type of fish. And so like all of those cultures have been equally represented in the media, and everybody has sort of felt included in everything, in politics, in music, in just pop culture of Congo. Everybody has been included. Everybody has had a chance to kind of like say their piece and have their voice be heard and be included in society. And I think that that's something that America needs to do. America acts like, I feel, that the only demographic that is worthy to be represented majority is the Caucasian demographic. And that's why there's still a lot of stereotypes. There's still a lot of division because accurate representation is not being presented in the media. Okay, so let's say that the representation of African Americans, Black Americans isn't gangbangers and whatever anymore. It's not necessarily negative anymore, but all you have are like, when you think Black Americans, come on, be honest, what do you think? You think athlete. You don't necessarily think actor. You don't necessarily think doctor. You don't necessarily think teacher. You think athlete. When you think of a Caucasian American, a male Caucasian American, the categories are endless of what he could be. When you see a successful Caucasian male, you can't really pinpoint what it is that made him be who he is. It put him in that position. But then when you think Black Americans, you think athlete. When you think a Hispanic, you probably think somebody who works in construction or maybe somebody who owns a restaurant. You think Asian. You think somebody who's in IT. You see an Indian American, you see that he's successful, you're like, it's probably a doctor. Representation has been so limited for all of these different people, all of these different immigrants in these different cultures. But it's not because there is a shortage. There isn't a shortage. There are just as many brilliant Black actors as there are white actors. There are probably just as many brilliant Black engineers as there are white engineers. There are probably just as many brilliant Black doctors as there are white doctors. But representation has kind of put all of those other cultures and all of those other people kind of like in a bubble. And breaking out of that bubble almost puts a target on your back. And so a lot of people are afraid to pursue those different things. And when they're being afraid, they're afraid to pursue those things because they're not adequately and accurately represented and included. And so it just brings it all back to that foundation. There's not inclusivity, there's not representation. So let's decide to pursue those things because they don't see people like them doing it. And when there's stuff like that happening, you can't possibly expect everybody to feel included. You can't possibly expect all these cultures and all these people to mesh together when there are certain places that certain people don't think that they can get. So I think accurate representation is first. When Barack Obama became president for the first time in '08, that was the very first time I felt as a Black child, as an immigrant, that I could do something great or be somebody great. I don't know, I'm not even gonna lie, I don't know much of Obama's policy or what he did when he was in power. I don't even think I was old enough to vote for his second term in. I think I was still 17. No. It was a year that I turned 18, but I didn't turn 18 quick enough to vote. And so like I didn't get to vote for him. I wasn't really educated on much of his policies and what he stood for. But just seeing a Black man, seeing a Black first lady who wasn't mixed, just all Black, just an all Black family. You see them and you're like, wow, he is the leader of the free world. He is the most powerful man in the world. There's nothing I can't do. Representation is so important for Black kids. You know, we grew up in America. This is a parentheses. Also, we grew up in America and it wasn't cool to be African. It wasn't even it wasn't even cool to be Black American. Now you imagine you add the fact that you're Black and then you're like bottom tier Black, you're African. It's hard. We didn't have anyone who represented us in the media, anyone who made us feel like we were important to society, like we were important to the world. You know, our generation, our brothers, our older brothers, and maybe some of our uncles, but not our parents. Our parents didn't really shift that for us. It was, I guess, the generations that were just slightly ahead of ours that allowed us to see and be represented in that manner. You know, the first time that we see like a real Black superhero was Black Panther, and that was what
16.
2016? Nah, it wasn't.
Or no, 2018.
Yeah, it was 2018. And imagine, you know, once Wakanda, I'd like to say, is not a real African country for those who are confused. It's not a real place.
Who don't know that yet.
Yeah, who don't know that. It's not a real place. But there was such a huge shift in 2018. And even in 2019 with The Lion King, the live action version, and then Black Panther, to see Africa represented in a dignified way made African kids feel like, okay, you know, let me go back and really research about where I come from. Let me remember the qualities of my culture, of my people. And we were reinstilled with that pride to be African. What, you know, I mentioned earlier during the podcast that before coming to the United States, we passed through Belgium. So growing up, I would never say that I came from Africa. I would never say that I was from Africa. But where do you come from? Oh, I would say I come from Belgium, because it was more socially acceptable, because Belgium has white people. It's predominantly male, predominantly Caucasian. And that's what felt safe at the time. But now, with representation of certain artists and even Black American artists who are beginning to go back to Ghana for the year of return and like figure out their African roots and where they come from, and showing Africa in more than just the safari or monkeys and apes and lions and tigers, seeing civilization, being reinstilled with that pride All of that happened because of representation in the media. African kids saw themselves on the big screen. African kids saw themselves be excellent on the big screen. Black kids saw a black man become president of the United States. Black kids saw more than just athletes and musicians. And in order, I think, for all of those cultures to come together, it's just representation. We need to see ourselves. I need to be able to, because I was not growing up looking at, I don't know, what's her name? Barbara Bush. I didn't look at Barbara Bush and think, oh my goodness, I want to be like her. I can be like her. You just don't have that personability with those people. You just don't. It doesn't matter. You can't act fake and be like, oh yeah, no. I don't look at Barbara Bush and think that I can do what she does. But I do look at Michelle Obama and think that I can become what she has become, do what she has done. And Michelle Obama's qualifications are probably even higher than Barbara Bush's. But looking at Barbara Bush, you still don't think that you can attain what she attained. But then you look at Michelle Obama and you're like, if she can do it, I can do it too, because she looks like you. She looks like you. And being the best way to bring value to all of these cultures and all of these different types of people is to make sure that all of those people are adequately represented. Kids need to see themselves.
It's actually really interesting because I think about, like, in the, you're speaking about media. Let's talk about Hollywood, for example. Whenever there's like a all black cast, for example, for Black Panther, or in Mulan, the movie that's coming out soon, there's like this all like Asian cast, and people feel like they're represented because you can see yourself like on the TV.
Yeah, with crazy stupid Asians. Crazy rich Asians. Sorry. Not stupid. There's a movie called Crazy Stupid Love. I got it confused. I'm not calling Asians stupid.
Crazy rich Asians. Yeah, no, exactly, just like that. You get those type of things, and for somebody might be like, I mean, well, what's the big deal anyways, right? But for some
You're
kids,
used to always seeing yourself on
for
TV.
some kids, like, it's a really big deal. I remember whenever they were about to make that movie that came out a couple years ago. It was like almost based off of Moses, and the cast was all white. And people have like, why are Egyptians depicted as being as all white, for example, right? And so some people are like, well,
Egyptians are black, by the way.
I mean, that's always a topic of discussion as well. So there's just these little things. I mean, even speaking to when we were younger, I do remember that there were people who, whenever you would ask them, where are you from? Never said they were from Congo. I'm from Belgium, I'm from Finland, I'm from this, I'm from this, I'm from this. And that comes from a place of, I remember being young in elementary school, and kids are asking you, hey, did you guys wear clothes in Africa? Hey, did you guys do this and this and this in Africa? Hey, did you guys have lights in Africa? I mean, kids are innocent.
Do you have a pet lion?
Right. Yeah, do you have a pet lion, right? Kids are innocent. This is what they see on TV.
That's all
right?
that represents
If
us.
all you ever see on TV is the donate to feed this kid, if that's all you ever see and this is your understanding of Africa, and I come here as an African and I'm like, oh, this is how you see me? Like, this is the kid that you donated to? To make matters worse, I remember during one of the World Cups, I think it was either America lost to one of the African countries, and this person posted on Facebook and it said, wow, after everything we've donated to you guys went ahead and beat us, right? They said it in a joking manner, and I laughed, and then I stepped back, and I was like, wow.
I didn't laugh.
I was like, wow, that's amazing. That this is some people's understanding of, like, for example, Africa, right? But that's another conversation, and we don't want to keep it here too long. But back to what you were saying in terms of representation and how people are able to see themselves and know themselves, to where now, I have people that want to come up to me and tell me, hey, I'm African. I did Ancestry.com and I figured I'm from the Congo. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then you just have even people that were like Hispanic. They're like, hey, I have like 10% Congolese in me. I'm like, okay, that's cool. So people are now, like you said, it was a shift that happened a couple years ago to where I feel like people now are wanting to find out their heritage, their background, different things like that. So
it's mainstream to be African now. It's mainstream.
Yeah.
And it's a blessing and a curse because, yes, it's great to finally be respected for who you're from. know how many times I've been called an African booty scratcher, like in elementary
That was
school.
my
Like,
favorite word.
looking back at it now, it's like we laugh, but it was debilitating as a kid. Like, it would just break your heart. Like, people are making fun of you for something that you had no say in, and it would just be like moments where you just wished you weren't African. I remember once I was in 5th grade. I was at Hughes Elementary, and my mom. It was my birthday, and my mom was bringing me lunch to school, and that was just like the super cool, popular kid thing. And so I remember I told my mom, I was like, Mom, when you come here, make sure you look really pretty because, I don't want people to think that like, because we're African, we're like less human. I remember my mom came to the school and she was dressed in the most beautiful Ankara fabric I think I've ever seen in my life to this day. So beautiful. She looked like a princess when she walked in. But I remember when I saw her, my heart sank. I was so embarrassed. I was like, why is she wearing African clothes? Like, people are going to think that that's like all we wear and stuff like that. And like, it just felt less than. But that fabric, I went back and I looked at that fabric is expensive. Okay. Like, that fabric was, like, my mom really just came as what she was taught was beautiful. And because there was nobody around me aside from my parents and like the Congolese community that told me that that is beautiful. For me, that was embarrassing when she came and like my friends were like, what's your mom wearing? Like, where'd she buy that? And like, I was just irritated. I was like, why can't she just wear like slacks and like a suit? But then like, and now everybody wants to wear dashikis. Yeah. Everybody, everybody's wearing African fabric. Everybody wants to do the face paint and stuff like that. That's just stuff that was just pivotal to our culture that we just did not grow up having any pride in. And it breaks my heart because, yes, we've caught up, but we're grown. We're 25, 26, 27. Like, the kids who really dealt with this were like late 20s, turning 30. And we spent the majority of our young adult lives ashamed of who we are as a people. And that messes with your identity. That messes with the way you see life, the way you see people. It causes complexes. And even if you are lucky enough to pull away from that stuff, finding yourself in that culture, you almost feel like you're a sellout, like you're not real because you spent so long denying that part of yourself. And then when you do come back, it's just like, it's bizarre. And, but yeah, I'm grateful for the next generation. Somebody has to be a scapegoat. And, my 5-year-old, at the time he was 4, they were showing different things on the world maps that were being taught, like the world maps at his school. And I always made sure that my kids knew where we were from. And I have a map of Congo at my house. And, they know that we're from Congo. Both of my kids were born here, but my oldest has lived and gone to school back in Congo. And so he knows Congo. And so, like, at school, they would ask certain students, where are you from? Where are you from? My son, without hesitation, he goes, I'm from Congo. But he was born in America. He normally should say, I'm American. I'm from America. But he knows that home, my blood, my heritage is Congo. And he says it with so much pride. And that's possible because I, as an adult, am beginning to see representation of, I guess, the African culture. And that pride has returned. So I can instill that in my kids, who will instill it in their children. And that pride of Africa and that pride of where you come from will grow with them. So.
Yeah. And I think that's good. And I think one thing that that I feel like I relate with y'all in, and then I'll end my part with just a couple pieces of encouragement. But I think this issue that y'all are talking about in terms of like representation in media, like I think it's definitely something that is just like potentially a issue with just how media is structured right now in terms of only having like so many channels and like how things are like that. Because, for example, whenever I travel down to Costa Rica or even over in Europe and I say I'm from Texas, they're just like, oh, how many horses you got? Like, and they're like legit asking rather than like being sarcastic or something like that. And so I'm just like, no, like that's not how we roll down there. And so I think it's something that like we in America may have uniquely struggled with. I think it is something that we do struggle with kind of as humans, and just like categorizing people and tending to stereotype rather than treating people like as individuals and things like that, which like you and I have talked about a lot. And so maybe like my couple pieces of encouragement, like even though y'all may feel this temptation to like not to be that you are a sellout in some kind of way, like no, like you're not, because at the end of the day, like you're the ones who are passing this heritage on to your kids. Because if you really were a sellout, like you wouldn't be doing that right now. Like you would have completely abandoned it and not even be embracing it right now. But then as well, definitely just understand that like those of us who are, how can I say it, who are true believers should be here, like one, supporting y'all in everything that you're doing with culture and raising your kids and everything like that. But then as well, treating you with equal respect, because you're just like, you're another member in the family of Christ, like at the end of the day. And I think something that, all types of communities could like practically do to show that is like help out in their local communities, so that people who are in those like the kids that are in those communities can see that people of all different types can be respectable people, whether it's with generosity, whether it's, hey, look, they're dressed like nice, or they're dressed in their African, traditional clothes. Like that's something to be proud of. And so I think as the issues with media and TV and everything like that, as we sort those out, I think something that we can do in the meantime while that work is being done is just continue to be involved in local communities, because like those personal interactions that I think kids have with people, like underestimating those would be something that'd be, I think, definitely like a detriment for like our culture and things like that.
Yeah, and it really comes to the point of like when we had a culture dinner. I remember a lot of people had questions afterwards, and I was like, "This is awesome," because you're kind of able to see someone else's culture, understand them, hear why they think the way they think, and just all these different things. So, but yeah, no, I mean, we just want to thank you for taking the time to come on.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a lot of knowledge that you dropped on us. I was like, yo, I didn't know that. I was learning. Like, I'm Congolese myself, and I'm over here learning. So that's awesome. I appreciate you coming and spending time with us.
Thank you for having me. And if I could add just one small thing.
Yeah.
To like any person in any field, or even in the United States, if you feel like a minority in your field, I feel like one word of encouragement I can have for you is to take up the space. Take up space. If you think that you being in that room is going to take up some space, take it up. Cement yourself in your domain. Cement yourself in that place that you didn't have the example. Be the example. Okay? Be the representation that you wish you had as a child. Be the representation of your culture. Be the representation of Christ, especially. Walk into a room and radiate Christ. And that will be more powerful and I think more effective than anything any culture can bring to the table. Christ is the foundation of everything good. And I think the best part of every culture finds Christ in some of whatever it is that they consider to be good in their culture. So thank y'all for having me. Thank you for listening to me and for inviting me. It was truly an honor.
Yeah.
Of course. And echoing Josue's sentiments, really appreciate you taking the time, coming on, everything like that. And so, Yeah, thank y'all for listening today. Hope it was something that was fun. Hope y'all enjoyed listening to it. We're going to list all of Penielle's information down in the description, everything like that. So go give her a follow, go support her in everything that she's doing. As well, all of our information will be down in the description. So if you want to support the podcast or support the organization and everything that we're doing around the DFW area, since we can't travel anywhere right now, that'd be much appreciated. So Penielle, thank you again. So until next time, guys, much love. God bless.